Recently, I got an email from Matt H asking me how to cook when money is tight. He writes, assuming you were a college student with access to only the most minimal of tools and a restricted income, how would you handle it? What would you keep stocked in your pantry and cupboards? What would be your go-to simple but nutritious and tasty meals? How could I say no to that? Let's do it. Let's talk about all the mistakes I made when I was a young and poor cook and what I would do differently if the current me could give advice to the 20-year-old me. So the first mistake people make is having a lot of useless equipment. I've met college students with fondue pots and milk frothers and creme brulee torches and waffle irons. When people know you like to cook, they like to give you cooking gifts, and 90% of those tend to be terrible and useless. You need very little equipment, but it needs to be good. Here's a list of equipment that you really can't live without and the most affordable, high-quality brands. Chef's knife. If your life is very chaotic and you can't make sure your careless roommates won't touch your knife, get an Easel chef's knife or Victorinox. Easel is just like Victorinox but a bit cheaper, and an AccuSharp. If you can keep your knife away from abusers and can teach yourself how to hone, get a Misen with a honing rod and the Wajak cones for angle guides. Don't worry about boning knife, paring knife, and bread knife. You can live without them for now. It's better to have one good knife than 3 bad ones. Cutting board. If you have room for a 12 by 18 board, that's great. If not, get 11 by 15. Plastic, of course. Wood is too much hassle. No flimsy mats, please. They don't stay put and they warp in the dishwasher. 10-inch skillet with a lid. This will come as a shock, but if I only had one skillet, it would be a non-stick one. They brown just as well as stainless, but unlike stainless, they can cook eggs, potatoes, and fish. Non-stick won't give you the brown bits to deglaze with stock, but you are a poor college student, you don't have time to make stock. Most of the proteins you'll be cooking are eggs, and they need a non-stick pan. If you have money and space and want to upgrade, get a stainless steel 10-inch skillet too. 1/2 sheet. This is perfect for roasting vegetables and baking almost anything. Microplane zester, tongs, spatula, peeler, silicone spatula, and whisk. My tongs and spatula are intentionally metal. I find plastic and silicone utensils don't give me the same kind of grip and maneuverability. I know, you shouldn't use them on non-stick pans. I wouldn't be surprised if companies tell you not to use metal utensils because some moron will take a knife and cut something in a non-stick pan or give it a really good scrape with the spatula. But I'm careful and barely touch the pan, and quite frankly, my spatula hurts less than this toast. See? Ow! And I cook this in a non-stick pan. We've legalized pot. Can we please legalize responsible use of metal utensils? And speaking of pot, you don't really need a pot. If you can't afford one, you can go without it. You could boil pasta or cook rice for one person in a skillet. You could make soup in a skillet too, but if you'll be buying a pot, may I suggest Instant Pot? It's only a little bit more than a regular pot, but it will allow you to do the money-saving dishes like beans and cheap meat braises overnight or while you are at work or school. Don't kid yourself. Instant Pot is not instant, but it gives you the flexibility normal pots don't. Blender. If you can afford some tiny cheap blender, that would be great, but completely optional. This is the key to not wasting your herbs. You can puree them with some garlic, lemon juice, and oil and give them a new life. That kind of sauce can perk up any dish. I think that's about it. Now let's look at the pantry. The second biggest mistake people make is getting a ton of spices and dry herbs. If you're from an Indian family and you have all sorts of spices, I am sure you'll actually use them. If you are an American or Russian, it's safer for me to make fun of Russians than Americans because I am Russian, and you got all these spices because one day you might need them, please don't even bother. What exactly is in your pantry will depend on what cuisines you are most comfortable cooking. I mostly cook Mediterranean, so here's what I can't live without. Salt, obviously. Lemons, keep them in the fridge and they'll last you for months. You probably don't have time to go shopping on a regular basis and you never want to find yourself without a lemon. At least I don't. 1, vinegar. My favorites are red wine, balsamic and rice, but you don't need all of them. Just pick one if money or space is tight. Dijon mustard, salad dressing, sandwiches, hard-boiled eggs, lentils. I think almost anything is better with Dijon mustard. Pomegranate molasses. I know it sounds exotic, but it adds so much complexity to dishes and it doesn't spoil. It's like a thicker, sweeter, nuttier vinegar. Soy sauce. Neutral oil, like canola for a searing, and olive oil for everything else. If you have a big bottle of oil and you don't cook much, pour some into a little bottle and keep the rest in the fridge so that it doesn't go rancid. I find that people buy some special expensive olive oil and try to make it last for a year. That's way too long. You really only have 1 to 2 months after you open the bottle, so use it with abandon. If I had to live with only one spice, it would be Spanish smoked paprika. That's probably because I mostly cook Mediterranean dishes and they use mostly fresh herbs, not spices. Canned or boxed tomatoes, canned tuna, canned sardines, canned beans. Whatever grain you like to eat, rice, bulgur, quinoa, farro, they're all cheap and very nutritious. Lentils, dry, not canned. Unlike dry beans, they cook very quickly. Cheap red and white wine for cooking, like tubak chak, onions, and garlic. By the way, please ignore the fact that many of these products say organic on them. If money was tight, buying organic would be the last thing on my mind. Now the perishables. The third biggest mistake is buying food that goes bad quickly. So I suggest you stick to perishables that are not too perishable, because as a college student, you don't always have time to cook. I would suggest you get lots of eggs, since they can often last a month, and lots of root vegetables and winter squashes. Beets, carrots, butternut squash, potatoes, sweet potatoes can usually last a while in the fridge. Just make sure to keep them in bags so that they don't dehydrate. If you want something green, in an instant, keep plenty of frozen peas in your freezer. If you want leafy greens, try baby spinach or pre-washed salads. They will usually last in the fridge for 3-4 days. You might have the best intentions and buy a bunch of regular spinach or Swiss chard, but it takes a lot of washing and drying and needs a salad spinner. And if you don't process those leafy greens the day you buy them and store them properly, they might just go bad. So don't bite off more than you can chew. Okay, so what should we cook? Eggs. Delicious, nutritious, cheap, and so versatile. I have a very large collection of egg dishes and basic techniques on my channel. The links for this and all the other dishes I'll mention from now on are below. Beans and grains. Cook once, eat the whole week. My favorite dirt cheap grain dish is mujadra. It's bulgur with lentils, caramelized onions, and roasted tomatoes. Takes a bit of time, but a big batch doesn't take any longer than a small batch. I can eat this all week and not get tired of it. If you have an Instant Pot, you can make easy and cheap lentil and bean soups and stews. I'll post a recipe for my Instant Pot black bean soup below. It uses dry beans without soaking. It doesn't get cheaper or easier than that. Canned tuna and sardines. If you need ideas for killer canned sardine pantry dish, how about the Sicilian-inspired pasta? As far as meats go, I would stick to chicken thighs, pork shoulder, and ground meats. They freeze well before and after cooking, as long as you are using them for braising preparations. In other words, long and slow. You could braise a pork shoulder or make bolognese in the Instant Pot and freeze them in small portions to defrost when needed. In case you're braising in the Instant Pot, make sure you are using recipes specially formulated for it. The big difference from a normal braise is that you'll need way less liquid. For vegetables, your workhorse would be roasting, since most of them are roots and winter squashes. I'll link to my favorites below. Well, that just about covers it. Oh, and one more tip about equipment. Ask for very specific presents from close family and friends. Don't tell them you want a knife or a pan. They don't know how to research this stuff. Here is my first real pot and my first real skillet. And both of these were presents from my husband, who was still a poor grad student at the time. I still use them every single day, and they still bring me great joy 20 years later. Dear college students and recent grads, it probably doesn't seem like it right now, but there is great joy in cooking with all these restrictions. It's magical, and you can make something delicious out of pretty much nothing. Enjoy this wonderful period in your life when every meal can bring you amazing discoveries. Sure, you'll make mistakes, we all do. And that's okay, because you can always try again tomorrow. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. For more thought-provoking culinary topics, don't forget to subscribe to Helen's Kitchen channel. And if you are ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in one of my classes.